Hi there, and welcome back to the Fuse Show. My name's David Tran, and I'm one of the co-hosts of this show. I'm also a co-founder of Xfusion.io, and today I'm joined by Scott Orlinsky. He's the co-founder and COO of Everyware, a leading contactless payments and communication solutions platform. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Thank you, David.
So I recognize that based on what I can see publicly, at least, you've had a pretty extensive career in importing consumer goods prior to Everyware. What led you to go from that into where you are today?
Well, that's a great question. In my background, I was, as you said, importing, and I was working mostly for very large chain retail stores, big box stores as they're affectionately known. And I saw a lot of disparity between what the big box stores could do, both financially and bring in so much inventory versus what a small local mom and pop could do. And one of the things that inspired me to get into our new business was basically to kind of level the playing field, give the smaller, mom and pop store the same opportunity to make a sale as simply and quickly as, the household name could. So that was one of the big reasons we got into this.
What did the transition look like?
Well, originally when we started, we had a wonderful idea. I think most people do, and it was without revenue. We had an idea and a beautiful PowerPoint, and here's what we're going to do. And we got a couple of, early adopters to come in and try, but for the most part, it was non-revenue generating. It was a good idea, and we were getting people to pay attention, but they didn't have to pay for it. And then as we started growing, we realized, the biggest transition was that we needed to show the true viability of the business, that it could make money and sustain itself. So we had to show how we would earn a buck. So that was one of the earliest transitions, was to take the concept from idea to reality, and would the market really deem it a value to them, and would they pay for it?
How long did it stay as an idea that you either held in your own brain or talked about amongst your co-founders before you turned it into a product that at least one person can use?
Yeah, I would say it happened a lot faster for us to grow, and we had help along the way. Probably one of the biggest silver linings to the COVID era for a business like ours was, pre-COVID, we would show companies our idea of how they could accept a new form of payment for whatever product or service that they sold, and they thought it was a really interesting idea, but it really wasn't a need at that moment in time. It was a good idea, but there were other ways to collect, for them to collect payment. But then you fast forward a little bit, and COVID hit, and it sort of turned the whole world upside down. We were just one of the fish, swimming in the big school, where the need for a contactless payment solution very quickly became a need, not a want. And for businesses to offer a truly contactless experience, they turn to us.
So from a personal perspective, how different did your roles, well, I imagine there's a lot of differences, but what were the most stark differences from your previous roles to where you are today?
I would say myself, I did not grow up in the payments business. I grew up, as you mentioned earlier, in consumer products. I was helping companies import items or create items and then put them on shelves for consumers to shop. And in this case, it was much more of a virtual experience. So my biggest learning curve was going from a packaged item with a brand that screams what the item was, like Beats headsets or whatever it might be, but something that was easily identifiable, to now something that you had to kind of imagine. Imagine taking a remote contactless payment. Those words today make a lot of sense, but at the time it really didn't. And I didn't come from a payments background. So that was a really big learning curve for me. I had never negotiated with banks or credit card companies before. So this was all new. I didn't know anything. I didn't have any reference point coming into that part of it. So I would say that was my biggest transition.
How did you go from the point of having, like you said, no reference to becoming a up and coming expert in the space? Like, how did you learn everything you need to learn? How did you, how did you like adapt to all those changes?
Honestly, just through persistence. I read a lot. I'll say that. I can read a novel, which has nothing to do with payments, but at the same time, I'm constantly like on Audible or some kind of whether I'm working out or driving in the car or on a train or plane, I'm constantly always listening to some new book that's relevant to the payments business, and that taught me a lot. But I would say at the end of the day, it was sort of the school of hard knocks of just being in the meeting room and realizing what I didn't know and learning new terms. I'd say the biggest challenge of all was the acronyms. There's so many acronyms, particularly in, I don't know, maybe it's in every industry, but particularly in finance, that it was an acronym followed by an acronym. So you'd have to play catch up. It was kind of hard, to follow along in a conversation unless you knew what somebody was talking about. And at the time, I did not. So my partner was always, I think, a few steps ahead of me. He knew a lot more about it than I did going in, and he had more experience, and he was coaching me. But I don't think there was really any secret sauce other than writing it down, reading through it, being in the meeting, reviewing my notes, and the next time I heard it, I became much more familiar to me. And then, over time, you start to hear yourself telling others,
So do you have favorite audiobooks or Kindle books or whatever sources of like more traditional like books that you really liked?
I do. I could certainly share my hit list. I don't know if they're a New York Times bestseller list, but they certainly fit for me. I'm reading now a book called Traction. I don't know if I could get the author for you.
Is that something Wickman?
Yeah,
is that
correct?
Yeah. It's the EOS book.
It's EOS. And EOS, I felt was a really good book, not only because it was a good read, but also because you could use it as a tool with your team. So to have an operating system for your employees, and everybody always talks about, are you Windows based or are you Android?
Android or iOS.
Right. But nobody ever thinks in terms of, how do your employees operate? What's making them tick and feel good about their day. And that book really resonated with me because I've always been, a believer in, in a company, not in an individual. Yeah. So the smarter our people are, the better they are. And, luckily for me, I'm surrounded by people that are just a lot smarter than me. But to use this EOS tool, I would recommend to many people. I think if you're unsure of how to organize the team, if you're unsure of what their priorities should be, and it's awesome, and maybe it's cliche, but it's true that your goals are constantly changing, and I think as an early stage founder, I think we fell victim to being very responsive to what others needed for their business. They liked our platform, but they wanted to use it differently than the way we had designed it. So there was a lot of customization requests. And what happens is you chase a lot of those, opportunities because the salesperson thinks that they're great opportunities and you want to believe that they are, but you find yourself trying to, be all things to all people. And your goals are changing. You thought you're supposed to be focusing on something and you're now chasing a different rabbit. So that book, I would say, was helpful to me, David, because it helped me write it down. It helped me have other people write theirs down. We commonly refer to our goals as rocks. And it's a hard and fast, you can amend them and change them, but those should be your, things that you're really striving to do. And it's transparent to the rest of the company. And I found that to be very, very helpful. Sometimes just talking with your teammate, just talking out loud is like, it helps you reinforce what you're trying to do.
My co-founder and I started going through that exercise of EOS and the traction book about 2 months ago. We're still in the process of implementing everything at the full company scale, but it's definitely been a lot of help in terms of helping us organize things.
I hope so. I think he has some follow-on books that I would be interested in taking a look at too. All along during my life, I've always been an avid reader, and I've found that now that most of the books are much more focused on a particular subject matter. One of the, I had been a fan of motivational speakers in the past. The Tony Robbins experience and the power within and things like that. And those are all very helpful too. The difference, I would say, between the traction book versus a motivational speaker type book is, I have my own energy that wakes me up in the morning. I have my own reasons for being, going after achieving certain things that I want to get to. And yes, it's helpful to hear others give you more reasons to get excited. But at this stage, I think it's a little bit more specific to get a guide. We all need guidance. Even the President of the United States, he has a cabinet of people to make sure he stays on target and prepares you for meetings. And why should we be, even though we're young and starting up a new venture, I still think you need that type of support, whether it comes in the form of a book to help you write it down or people to bounce ideas off of.
As it relates to the space of payments, are there books that you really like in the space of payments?
I wish there was. Larry and I joke all the time that we're writing our own book. There is no textbook on it. The rules are constantly changing. It's been in the hands of the few. Everybody heard of all the card brands and Visa and MasterCard and American Express and Discover, and those are household names that everybody knows.
Yeah.
But it's all changing today. There's so much technology that's here today that wasn't here a month ago. You read headlines weekly about companies like Square, who they bought this company, or a company Stripe, and they bought that company. Yeah. One of the biggest, I think, challenges why there is no book to read is because it's constantly changing. It's been a running joke for us. Like, where's the manual on this? Like, who do you call at Amex when you have an issue? But there really is none. And if you look at all the stuff today that's going on with buy now, pay later, or different types, it's just every day there seems to be a new way to do payments.
One of my fears of the world of payments is that the law can't keep up, so you start diving into more and more ambiguous territory. I've been talking to my co-founder of whether we want to tokenize our business in terms of the equity, the payments, a lot of different components. And I look it up, it's there's no clear law that governs this. And I don't know how, if startups who are at the cutting edge of technology and innovation don't know what to do, how the heck are lawmakers going to decide how to make the right laws?
Correct. We have, we work with a lot of pharmacies today, and they want to add every possible method of payment for somebody to refill a prescription, from their phone, and then pay for it from their phone, and it can be delivered today. When have you ever heard of medication? That's a new thing now for people to be able to do, order their refills and have it delivered. For the tokenization, as you just said, or if somebody wants to pay through crypto, which again is something that we offer as well, but it's so new. what is the crypto price, and if somebody looks to return an item, what's the value of crypto is very volatile, right? I mean, it's changing every 30 seconds, the value. So having something not specifically tied to the U.S. dollar is a big question mark. So it's in the hands of government to try to regulate it. I know they are trying to regulate it, but it seems like they're losing that battle.
I was transacting in some stablecoin about 2 months ago, and this was before stablecoin was actually pegged to $1. So it's not hard pegged to $1 back then. It was like soft pegged to $1. So sometimes it's 0.9999 of a dollar, sometimes it's 1.001 of a dollar. And technically, if I was to follow all the laws, I need to log all of those minor differences in terms of converting between and back and forth between the coin and the actual dollar. It's so silly.
Right. It is. But those rounding errors can be a lot of money.
It's true. So what do you see as like the future of payments? Like, do you think the government's just gonna back off and be like, all right, y'all do what you want, or do you think they're gonna clamp down or find some middle ground?
Yeah, I think the future is what the market's been dictating, and that is mostly what you've seen. The biggest change in has been peer-to-peer payments, where PayPal or Elon Musk had originally came out with an idea of how David and Scott can share money electronically through their phones, and I owe you 20 for dinner, and we could quickly settle up. And then you have the Uber experience. You just slam the door closed and be on your way, and your bill is settled. There's no more reaching and through the taxi. So for payments, we basically tried to create that type of Uber experience from a business to a consumer. And with that came a lot more compliance requirements, receipts, and payment confirmations, things to make it look and feel a lot more of a business transaction than, Scott and David, sharing, splitting a bill. So that's been one of the biggest changes for us is to be able to allow businesses basically to do a remote payment through a text message. It's very straightforward. I think that's been the beauty of it. If we learned anything from Apple and Steve Jobs and his whole battle cry of how he built Apple, it was make something simple and then optimize it. What was missing from payments, from our experience, was the ability for a small business to sell something to an individual consumer remotely and be able to safely and securely take the payment in real time as if they were standing in the store. And when malls closed and COVID hit and they still needed to pay the rent or whatever it was, they still needed to sell product. They needed a way. So the invention of curbside pickup, curbside delivery, like all these things are really new. There was always, Domino's pizza delivery, but it was never at this scale. So I would say what we've seen the biggest change has been the simplification of a text message, but make it more, it's always been conversational, but now let's add commerce to it. So conversational commerce, a text message between the company, whatever they may be, and its consumer through a text message, making sure that they have the information of what they need and being able to settle the bill right from your phone.
How do you know what compliance rules are and are not relevant when you're building a payments company?
Yeah, great question. There's really nothing to prevent a lot of companies today. If you're a coder, if you want to wake up tomorrow morning and create a payments company, there's really a small barrier to entry, and you could go ahead and do that. What you will find along the way that you'll be faced with, though, is the compliance issues that you just mentioned.
Right.
So, for example, being PCI certified, making sure that there are certain levels you pass through amounts of money that you're able to transfer, different states you're able to conduct business in. So that's one of the first things you'll be faced with, and make sure that you are compliant with the PCI regulations. And then as you go forward, there's public companies that will require a much deeper confirmation that you are compliant, that you are secure, that there's no data breach. You're not getting any sensitive data like David's credit card information. There's no way that would ever be exposed in the wrong hands. And we have to go through audits. There are what's called SOC 2, and there's different levels and types of SOC 2. So we've had to go through those audits. Those are extensive. They're expensive and extensive. They take a lot of time. You got to really lift up, to show all how you're storing or not storing or passing data. And then finally, I would say one of the biggest ones also is HIPAA. I don't know if you're familiar with HIPAA, but from health records point of view, that is the gold standard. For us to be able to do transactions for people that want to buy a refill for their medicine from a local drugstore, or they go for an MRI, or they go visit a hospital, to be able to make their appointment through their phone, which we do, and then they get a copay, in advance of your visit that's coming up tomorrow. You can settle the bill now for whatever it is. HIPAA certification was one of the other major milestones for us, to be able to, show all these pharmacies and health and hospitals, how safe and secure the data is.
How do you go through these? How do you get these certificates? Like, what does it take for a company that's, say, like if I was to create David's payments tomorrow, what do I need to do to get these certificates?
Ooh.
And how much does it cost?
Well, it's expensive. I will tell you. Okay. You kind of get what you pay for. There's no shortcut in this. You must go through the more business that you're trying to do, the more transactions that you're trying to handle. So in our case, we're doing a transaction every second of the day. So the volume is very, very high. In order to achieve the ability to do that across every single state and do it correctly, you need third parties, service companies that specialize in training your staff, making sure every server, every individual computer, the list goes on. I mean, it's extremely extensive. They'll give you a task list of 100 topics and then subcategories within, and it'll take you 6-8 months to pass through. They get access codes to every single, way that you get and share data. So they double check to make sure that there's no way that anything can be breached. In our case, one of the biggest things we do is, you mentioned tokenization earlier. That's been a very big keyword. And one of the things that they look at very early on, how do you tokenize somebody's credit card? So we keep a card on file. So if David visited a store and we have you intend to go back to that store, you will often say, keep my card on file. Very common.
Right.
And it's been an amazing thing because it has really cut down on fraud. By David agreeing to keep his card on file, the tokenization or the encryption of your credit card it's a bunch of random letters and numbers that mean nothing. So even if somebody did, physically take all the data, there's nothing they could do with it. So that whole tokenization process, the card on file process, was a huge undertaking, and to show how you are encrypting people's credit cards for safety is of utmost concern, to companies. So to walk through that, to walk through the security measures, making sure people are not, basic training of your team, making sure they're not opening emails that look scammy or fishy and things like that. So it looks like, so there's a lot of basic training that goes on. You have to train your staff when it comes to HIPAA. You have to train your staff, and they have to take tests on. You basically have to become a HIPAA expert. What information can be passed? What data is sensitive? What data is okay? In the case of Everyware, which is our company, we don't pass health data at all. We're basically just what the patient owes. How much do they owe? So we would get very, very simple information that would say David Tran, $50, and that's really about all we get, plus your cell phone number. So we send you the text message with an invoice on behalf of, the hospital or the pharmacy, it's branded under there. So you recognize immediately when you get a text message that it's coming from, somebody that you want to go visit, and you just settle the bill right from there. So there's no, we don't know what prescription medicine or what was the reason you went to the hospital or what the reason for the bill is at all. It might be listed as a service that says, telehealth, might be listed as a service that says pharmacy, flu shot, but there's no blood type information on David.
Did you know from the very beginning that it was always in your roadmap to go through and get all those compliance certifications, or did those arise as customers requested them?
I knew some of them from day one that we were looking to build a business that would do a lot of transactions. We started off as a text messaging platform, and then we quickly added payments to it. And when we were on the texting side, it came with its own set of compliance. You can't just mass text. There are rules and regulations. FTC governs how you communicate with people. So we were very quickly on top of what we needed to do to make sure we were compliant as a text messaging platform. And then the other side of our business very quickly was marrying payments with the text message. So right from the get-go there, we added PCI, HIPAA, and then ultimately, to answer your question, SOC 2 came later. That wasn't day one. That was when we reached really a certain level, amount of transactions, and then we started working with public companies, and publicly traded companies have that as a requirement. So as we grew in terms of our volume and our ability to handle bigger transactions, more transactions with bigger companies, it exposed us to more need for more certifications.
Did it take a long time to adapt to SOC 2, or were you always generally 99% of the way there prior?
Yeah, that's really intuitive. We, like I said, we didn't really come from payments background. So when we built it, we didn't buy or inherit any legacy systems that were outdated or non-compliant. We started and built from the ground up, and everything that we did was from our own build. We didn't acquire and bolt on anybody's anything. Everything we did was from our own coders, from our own staff, and adding to our platform. So to answer your question specifically, we were never non-compliant.
Gotcha.
Right. So we started off on the right foot. We sort of looked at the rules of the game as they were laid out to us from the get-go, and we made sure that everything that we built complied. Yeah. There were things we had to do additionally as we got bigger, for sure, that we just didn't anticipate, that you needed another redundant, set of circumstances in case of something that we weren't prepared for when we were smaller. But other than that, we were compliant from the get-go.
I was noticing that on your website, you have a variety of different use cases of how people can use this text-to-pay system. Did you, how many of those were ideas that you already had ahead of time, and how many of those did you discover once you, went to market? Yeah.
We named the company Everywhere. And there was a book that we read, to go back to one of your earlier questions, we read a book that was called Everywhere. And there was actually a person that wrote it in the 1930s and it was, the name of it was Everywhere. And the concept was this whole digital world, no matter where, if your foot touched on a surface tile, it would pull up your data and know what your preferences were. It was this very futuristic book, and it was called Everywhere. So when we got started and we said we're going to rename the company Everywhere, it was a very different use case entirely than every other payment company, because they were very focused on something specific, and they were trying to solve a problem for a particular industry, where we took an approach that we wanted something that was going to be everywhere, that it was going to apply to multiple use cases. And when we talked to, as we mentioned earlier, pharmacies, the use case was around can they send a refill? So in the case of a landscape or a gardener or the guy who comes to your house to fix your roof, if you're not home, what are his options to collect payment? Does he leave a bill on your doorknob? Does he put a letter in the mail that says, with an invoice? So we were very quickly learning the nuances of so many businesses. And that's been probably the most fun part of the business is what's your use case? It depends on if it's a local restaurant, what is his main thing? Oh, it's takeout. Okay. So we make sure that the way that the messaging looks and feels is specific to that business. The nomenclature, the words that are used, everything is very fitting, to that particular use case. So, our goal is to be everywhere, and to do that, we built basically a mail system that is completely customizable for whatever your use case is. You make the message. We're just the secure way to deliver it.
What about those scenarios where the one you describe is like, a person is doing a service and I guess the host or that the homeowner isn't home or no one's there to pay for the bill? Let's say this person texts the homeowner, but they just don't respond. What happens in that scenario?
Well, I think that's kind of odd. If I'm going to someone's home and I'm doing work for them, whether it's interior work or pool or roof, landscaping, those are very one-to-one conversations where the home services company met with the homeowner. They talked about what the person wants to get fixed. You're letting them in your home. It's very common. In the case of the person's not home, which is most of the time, we kind of hope that they're not home. The text message gets sent out either predetermined when the person finishes the job. They can just hit submit, and in real time, the ding, you get the text message. The beauty of it is most text messages are read in a few seconds. Unless you're in a meeting like this where you're not looking at your phone, not a meeting, but most people, though, get a text message and it's very quickly opened and replied to. It doesn't need to be replied, right away. That's not necessarily the way, socially it's acceptable to respond to a text message in an hour or a day. But for the most part, they get read. That it was read. In the case of what you described, let's say the person did not remit payment, then there's auto reminders.
Okay.
So, hey, just want to let you know we completed the job. Attached, please find your invoice. And the auto reminder gets sent out for you because you're busy on the next job. You're fixing another roof, you're at another home, and you're not in the business of collecting payments. So we try to make the system work for you. Make it very, very simple. You just set up the person's, what's their name, how much they owe you, the branding you can upload in a minute. And when do you want the invoice to go? Right away, you hit submit. And then if it's not paid, you just set the parameter. You'd like a reminder to go out in 1 day or 2 days. Very, very.
So I recognize you're building a payments platform. How many of your customers ask for more CRM related type of features?
Yeah, that's really what we see is they like CRM related features, particularly for segmenting data. So to give you a couple of examples, we have some billing companies. They could be medical billing companies or just collection billing companies. And when they fill in the information, they're able to use our platform to segment people in a particular state or all transactions that were a certain amount. So they're able to do things within the CRM is basically the backbone of Everywhere. We were built as a CRM, not thought of after. We thought of that from the get-go, that we saw value in being able to communicate with David, provided you're allowed to communicate with David, on a number of things that David's. That's what David wants to know about. You by default have opted in. You gave your phone number and said, yes, I need to know when my prescription is ready. I need to know if I'm due for a refill. I need to know if I owe. A lot of what we found with bills is not that people don't want to pay them. It's just the inconvenience, particularly during COVID. Lots of people were hesitant to open mail. We got a lot of new business from companies that print statements on behalf of companies and then mail the invoice to your home. And those companies turned to us and said, people don't really want to go to the mailbox.
Sure.
They're very hesitant. They're leaving Amazon packages out on their front porch and, spraying them down with Lysol. So what can we do? And we took a lot of those paper invoices that needed to be printed and mailed and lick a stamp, and we removed all of that and just sent a text message. And then you'd wait 24 hours, 48 hours, and you would get a big percentage of people that responded right away with, I didn't know I owed a copay. I didn't realize that I had a balance. And you would get a majority of payments in a few minutes that otherwise would have taken weeks, to actually arrive at somebody's home, for them to figure out how they're going to pay it, and then, go on from there. So that I think was huge. And the other, what I would tell you, David, also is there's other companies that you were describing that if I was an entrepreneur and I wanted to start a payments company, one of the things that we did differently than others that have tried it before us was, instead of taking you to a website where you have to go to a website and fill in your first name, your last name, your street address, all these questions, we bypassed all of that and took you straight to just the invoice. And then we did the work of making sure that the invoice and the payment gets routed, where it needs to go. But it shouldn't take David more than 15 seconds to pay his bill from his phone. If it turns into longer than that, then it's a problem, and people would abandon and they wouldn't like it. It's not as swift. It's not as streamlined. Yeah. And that was what we set out to do. How do we optimize this experience? I mean, kids today, it's like instant gratification. I want a song. I want to add it to my playlist. I'm not waiting an hour. I want it right now.
Right.
And why should that be any different if I want to pay for something? It's my money. I want to pay for it. And most people today that are paying from their phone have a digital wallet. Right? I mean, if you've paid for anything, you probably have stored a card on your phone. Right. So our niche, the way we just did it differently was, on top of all of the certifications which separated us from many, but also I would say the bigger thing was making it just a super easy process. So you're not being taken to some website to go enter information. You're being taken directly to the invoice to one tap and pay.
Would you happen to know the numbers on how many people change their phone numbers? I imagine it's not many, but I imagine it's also an edge case that you can't ignore.
Yes. What an amazing, thought. Years ago, and maybe, years ago, maybe even today. I mean, David, how many email addresses do you have? I know I have at least 3. Right? I mean, you have maybe an Outlook, a Gmail, your corporate one. So constantly emails are still a thing of people not afraid to update and change. They change jobs, they discontinue their work email, and they upload a new one. But that's not the same with your question with my phone number. You will see people move from one state to another and absolutely refuse to give up their cell phone number. Right? It's the weirdest thing. It's like, people always said that people were loyal to either Android or Apple, right. Like, I'm a Samsung. I'm an Apple. There was this tremendous brand loyalty. I'd say that's all true, but on a much higher scale, people are much more concerned that they don't lose their cell phone number. You could move to Alaska, and I think you will want your Manhattan 212 number. Like there is pride there in your area code. And that's been an amazing part of the success story of what Everywhere's done, because we base nearly everything on your cell phone. That to us is your unique identifier. David is David. There are no other cell phone numbers like yours. You are it. And I can't pay you. You have a couple of other things that are unique to you, your driver's license, your social security number, but I don't, that's a little bit too much. But nobody's afraid to hand out, what's your cell phone? Oh, here you go. And with that carries a lot of the authentication and the genuineness of what we're looking for to make it a straightforward. It's the most preferred way to communicate today, is through a text message. I mean, come on, there's 100 to 1 text messages per day than Zoom's pretty important, but it's a lot less video conferences going on today than there are text messages. So by going through texting and going through a cell phone, it sort of lived with the person no matter where they traveled. And that was a big key to the success of Everywhere.
What would you say takes up most of your time as a COO on a typical day?
I would say the majority of my time is taken up with leadership. Let me answer it this way. I used to think that I could manage people. When I was younger, I always thought, I could manage. But as I got older, I started to realize that I was wrong. That I don't really think that you can. I think, in my experience, you're better off trying to lead people than you are to manage them. If you set expectations, people tend to want to exceed them. If you're clear in what you're looking to achieve, the team around you will rally around it and make it happen at or below, at or below cost or faster than you would have expected. I think with certainty and clarity and providing good leadership, it is a much more time-consuming experience, but the rewards are well worth it. So David, I would answer you with telling you that I'd say the majority of my day is spent with leadership, trying to make sure that I'm leading correctly. I'm giving clear answers. I think there's nothing worse than people not sure what's expected or what we should do next. You're constantly, from one problem to the next as an entrepreneur. You're changing from finance to marketing to sales. The team is at a trade show. They're trying to sell. The other developers are trying to solve, a customized solution that a big customer is pushing us to achieve for them. So everybody has their own levels of stress. My biggest time crunch is leading everybody through that.
What would you say is the mark or marks of a good leader?
Curiosity, probably my number one thing. I like to listen. I think, we're given 2 ears and 1 mouth on purpose. The natural instinct for people is to talk. And I think if you're going to be a good leader, you got to be a better listener. I think that's a big trademark, for me. You genuinely want to make sure that you're mentoring people to be better than you. I think that's a good mark.
How do you go about doing that? Like, how do you mentor someone to be better than yourself? Like, what are some of the things that you think about, and what are some action items that you would apply?
I try to line up, like we were talking about earlier, in that book, in that traction book that I tend to refer to, quarterly rocks. What are your goals? What are you looking to achieve? Whatever that job is. If they're a manager of compliance, or they're, we're going through another audit for, let's say, something for security and safety reasons, they're very focused on that. And I think the big part of the how-to of for them to be successful is helping them define exactly what does success look like. Most of the time, I've seen people really anxious to get a job. They're looking to get promoted. They have what they look at as an achievement. And I would caution you, before you ask for the raise or ask for the job, that you sort of define in your own mind and make sure that the company shares the same vision of what does that job look like at its peak. What does success look like? Because you may think of it as one way just by doing a lot of things that are taking up a lot of your time. You're no doubt working very hard, but it may not be in alignment with what the company really needed the most. So I'd say defining goals is certainly up there. What makes a great salesperson great? What makes, I don't know. Is it because they sell the most? Is there like a chart that shows that they do the most amount of sales? Does that make them a great salesperson? I think that's sort of like a result, that they hit a milestone, they hit their quota, and they made a lot of money. I think the underlying reason why a great salesperson is great is because they're curious, that they're having a genuine, authentic conversation with clients, and that the client trusts them, that they're listening to them, that they understand what their use case is. Like I think it's very easy to sell something that somebody wants. That there's not a whole lot of, you could make a sales pitch, but I think the trick of it, the secret sauce is people that come back. In the SaaS world where you're selling a service, a lot of people get graded on churn. What's your churn rate? How many customers did you lose? How many customers what's your net churn? And a lot of the analysts from the outside looking in, they don't know any details of any story. All they look at is it net positive or net negative? And if it's net negative, everybody raises their hand. It's a big red flag. Right? But they don't really know the reasons of what or why. They're not interested in that. They just want to know what's the result. So what we've taught at Everywhere, what we've shared with our team is, every single customer is the most important customer. Customer success, customer service, that's the height of it. If there's a reason beyond that where there is and we have very low churn rate, I would say, I'm proud to say, as a result. But nevertheless, there are some companies that still do, not find, that we're the best for what they need. And on those occasions, we look back and say, where was the miss? You don't just sweep it under the rug. You look at what was the symptom, where did we miss? Were we not curious enough? I use that word all the time with our team. If you're going to be a great customer success person, if you're going to be a great salesperson, start with curiosity. Start understanding. Put yourself in their shoe for a minute. What's their biggest challenge? Everybody's challenged with something today. And as a software company, if you're not developing something new every single day, then you're going to be left behind. So the best way for us to build something new every single day is by listening to our customers every single day. What challenges are they faced with? And then how can we quickly resolve it for you? Hey, here's what we can do. Can we automate this? Oh, you need to save money through an automation? Let me show you how we can do that. So by working closer, I would say, with customers, being curious throughout the day is my number one thing that I would tell founders.
What channels of communication do your customers have with you? You being the company, not necessarily you personally.
Well, obviously we promote texting. That's the fastest way. We have, if you go to our website, everywhere.com, there's a link right there. Text us. So you click that, and right away you're going to get an answer within a minute or two. So that's our fastest way. There's obviously other contact us and lead forms and things for some of our distributors, and if they need information to download, then there's ways for them to go and collect what they need to resell Everywhere or offer it to their clients. But straightforward communication, David, I would say is either through email or text, but preferably text.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the last question I have for you is, what's something you've been learning, call it these past year or 2 years, that you feel like you wish you knew a long time ago?
I guess I would use a word of entitlement. You go through college, you get educated, you get a job, you learn a job, you perform well, you now think you know more, and you're entitled to more. You're entitled to get more, you're entitled to do more. But the realities of the world, looking back to answer your question, if I knew then what I know now, is, if it's my turn to merge onto the highway, I'm going to still need to wait my turn. I can be the most experienced driver that day, but if it's not my turn to merge in, I'm going to cause an accident. So you can have that sense of entitlement, but you still need to know your place. You still need to be humble. You still need to do the things that you did from day one that got you there. Believing that you've reached the pinnacle, or that you know it all and you have the answer right at the tip of your tongue to every question without thinking about it, is an act of just of a kid that I was before. So I think, to answer your question, getting a sense of just being humble today, getting a reality check daily of what don't I know about my customers and what's going to be helpful for them, not so much internally. I think we tend to look inward. We have a problem. Maybe it's a confrontation with a teammate. What did I do wrong? Or what did I say wrong? Or, I should have done, we always have second thoughts, at the end of the day. I wish I would have done it differently. And that's always going to be the case. But I think if we, in the moment, can kind of, think things through and look across the table and understand better, really what the challenges are from somebody else's point of view, that you can go forward. Maybe it's a little bit slower than just giving an instinctual answer, but you'll go further faster over the long run.
My business partner has this quote he likes to say and remind me of. It's like, smooth is fast and fast is smooth. And I really like that, in the sense that you can always, as a startup, really push yourself to get something out the door, but there's a hidden cost, either in technical debt, team burnout, personal stress, reduced family time. And I think once you have to figure out where all the things fit into the right place, and then just keep that consistent trajectory going.
I love that. That's a great quote. I would offer this to your partner. There's people look at the wind and people look at the current. And when you watch the news every day, they're always very excited to tell you about the wind, the hurricanes coming. It's much more newsworthy. The wind of opportunity is always like the fastest one. It was on your desk and now it's gone. There's so many analogies and things that people can visualize about wind. But the reality is, it's the current that's actually the more important, the more sustainable element to pay attention to. If you're on a river and you're on a stand-up paddleboard and there's a lot of wind, you're still not going to make it down that river going against the current. But it's the wind that gets all the publicity, but it's the current that really is driving.
I like that. I'll have to share that with him.
Food for thought.
Well, I'd love to give you the stage now. Thanks for joining me on the show. I'd like to give you the stage. For the people who want to follow you personally or follow your company's journey along, how can they do so?
Oh, thanks, David. The best way to follow us is our website is everywhere.com. You can look at us, obviously, look us up on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, all the major social outlets. Everywhere is spelled with a W-A-R-E, everywhere, like software. And if there's anything we can do to help you or you connect with your clients through a text message and the need to marry a text message with a conversational commerce with a payment method, please give us a call. We'd be happy to help. Please reference David and the show, so we can certainly give discounts and things along the way there. But I really appreciate being part of this Founders Guiding Founders video chat. It's been very fun for me, David. I really appreciate you including me.
Thanks for being on the show with me.